Welcome to The Hidden World of Women, a podcast brought to you by Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. My name is Emma and I'll be your host for today's episode. For our second episode of our ANZAC Day special, today I'm joined by another absolutely amazing woman. She is a kick-ass mother of three. She's a fitness enthusiast. She's a crazy messed up human, which in my opinion is the best kind. She's a military veteran and is now a leadership and life coach. So I'd like to welcome and thank you so much for joining me today, Nicky Thomas.
You're so welcome. I'm so excited to be here and share some of the stories that I have. So thanks for asking me, Emma.
I'm really excited to have you on. So you were in the Australian Army for just shy of 9 years?
Yep. So I did full-time service just under 9 years, and then I did another 4 years in the part-time Army, and then I was out completely.
Wow, that's a big commitment.
It was a lot. And it's funny because wasn't a big goal in my life. I wasn't one of those people who was like, yeah, I love it, I'm going to join the Army. It was just like, I wonder if I can do this. I went to Kapuka to see how I'd go with the basic training and absolutely loved it and just had this amazing career. I credit being in the military with so much of the strength and tenacity that I have in my everyday life today.
That's amazing. Who goes to Kapuka just to have, I wonder if I could maybe give that a shot.
That's what I said, crazy messed up human over here. Like, let's give this a crack. You know, it's that's definitely part of my strategy in the world.
No, I hope this is okay to share. So when I was speaking to you before we were doing the recording, you know, and I said, you know, did you grow up in a military household? And you're like, nah. And then, so what happened after you said no?
I know. I was telling my dad about this the other day. I go, God, no, none of my family were in the military. And then I go, oh, hang on, my dad was in the RAF, but that doesn't count. So don't tell the last lady that you interviewed. Tell her not to listen to that bit. But it's a very Army mentality. We think we're the best and everything else comes after. And if you speak to Navy, you'll get the same story from them. So.
100%. And, you know, it's the same with everything, isn't it? It's like I don't follow football. But if I did, I imagine I would feel the same about my football team.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's funny that I completely didn't even register in my mind. I remember when I was at Kapuka, I fell over and twisted my ankle. And one of the staff said to me, why are you here? Why didn't you join the Air Force if your dad was in the Air Force? And I was like, well, because I have to go all in or not at all. Like, that's just how it is. So
if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly.
I'm going to do it fully. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how old were you when you joined the Army?
This is a good one. So I was 23 when I joined, and I think that was a real benefit because I'd worked in retail and in management for 5 years. So I had some experience of what it was like to be in the real world, quote unquote. And so when I went into the military, I could see the ease and the difficulties. And I think coming from school, you might miss some of that, you know. So yeah, 23 years old when I joined.
So would you consider yourself to be a mature 23-year-old or quite a young 23-year-old?
I think I was quite a naive 23-year-old. So I often say, like, I grew up in a very small country town. So, you know, the life experiences that kids that grow up in the city get are pretty different to kids that grow up in the country. So I think I was quite a naive 23-year-old in that sense. However, having had 5 years in the workforce, that part of me was quite mature. Yeah. So it was just like the perfect storm, I suppose, for that environment.
So for a young person, or well, a less young person was joining the Army, what's the process of that? So you go over and do your basic training, and then what happens?
So firstly, you have to get accepted. So you have to go and do a fitness test, a psych test, an aptitude test. You have to go through all the testing, and depending on at what time you're applying and how many people they need and what jobs they want to fill will dictate whether you get in or not. You know, if they don't need a lot of a certain trade, then you may have to wait till the next round, or the testing will be harder, et cetera, et cetera. So once you get through all that, on the day you go, I was in Adelaide when I joined. So on the day you go into the city, you do another fitness test to make sure that you're still as fit as you were the last time. And then they put you straight on a bus.
Oh, wow.
So
that's a lot for you to go through just to give it a whirl.
In one day. But and probably as I look back now that I'm a mother, and I look back and my mum and dad came to see me go because they sort of swear you in and you get this big ceremony and then off you go. And my poor mum was just, you know, in tears. And I was like, what's wrong, Mum? Like, I'm fine. Off I go on this bus. And it must have been the most horrific experience. But yeah, then you hop on a bus and we drove to Melbourne, picked some more people up, drove to Wagga, and then you get off the little bus that you're on, and then you're on the big bus, and then you are on. That's when they start the yelling.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Straight away, they're like, wake up. And get your shit together and get off the bus. And you're immediately starting to be trained.
When you are being trained, are you trained, is it a mixed cohort? So are you training with men and women?
Yeah, so I did. So it changes frequently when you go through Kapuka. So when I joined as a reservist, but I went through Kapuka with all the full-time soldiers so we could do that mix when I joined. So there were 4 girls and like 44 boys. And so they tend to put all the girls in one section together. And then we had 2 other sections that were all male. So, so you're a minority. Absolutely, right from the word go.
So what was that like?
Well, again, Emma, I grew up in a country town on a farm with all boys. So I was
you're at home.
I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And I just never really, I wrote a blog post about this recently. It never really occurred to me that being a girl was a problem or would hold me back in any way. However, being in that environment and then seeing some of the other girls that came in, I remember one of the recruits got quite intimidated when we went onto the range for the first time, and she said, I just never really thought about shooting a gun. And I was like, you do know you joined the army, right? Like, yeah, it was quite funny. But to see her sort of have that experience, and I was like, yeah, again, I think my naivety, my ability to just go with the flow, and the fact that I grew up around a lot of boys, it was never a concern for me. Even the yelling and stuff, I was like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. I just kind of could hold my own. I should say also that one of my friends' dads, who had quite an extensive military career before I went to Kapuka, he said to me, Nicky, play the game, like they're going to yell at you a lot, it's for a purpose. So I did have that mindset as well of like, oh, this isn't personal, this is part of the process. So I think that really helped.
Yeah. And then so you obviously made it through your basic training, so you were fit enough.
I loved it. Yeah, it was probably the fastest I've ever run, and I will never run that fast again in my entire life. And I loved it. I got to the end of my 6 weeks, and I remember going back to my room to gather my bags, because when you're a reservist you can go home with your family. And I was crying. I loved it. I know, right? I'm such a weirdo. Anyway.
Well, I didn't want to be the one to say it since we've only just met, but yeah.
Exactly. I think I just had such a great experience because I was one of the stronger girls. I got given a lot of leadership responsibility. I got to sort of manage people. And again, the fact that I've ended up in a psych/coaching role is very interesting that sort of happened right at the beginning. And I just loved being part of the team and the ethos that it came with, and when you're at Kapuka, they're gearing you up for war. Yeah. And it's very emotional, and I just loved everything about it.
So you were an Army reservist for 4 years.
So I started in the reserves. I spent about 3 weeks there and went full time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So and because I trained with the full-time army and did the whole Kapuka in one go, I could just transfer over. So immediately when I got back home, I was like, no. I got sent on my first course in Melbourne, and I was like, no, this is for me. And so I went home and told my parents, and my mum, I don't think she spoke to me for a week. Like, how dare my little girl go and join the army?
Oh.
It was a tough one for mum to accept, which I now as a mother understand.
Yeah.
Yes. So then I went off full time, and I was 8 years. And then when I had children, I went back to reserves.
So you were in the army, and it's like active army type of thing. So you were in the army for East Timor? That would be
correct. Yeah. So the first deployment I went on was East Timor, and it was later in the game, and I was in Signals Corps. So as a female, there's only, at that time, it's much different now, but at that time there are only a few things you could choose from. So I looked at it from a very logical perspective, which is very unlike me, and thought I'll choose IT, so systems administrator, because I'll have those qualifications when I leave. And so I got to do deployments with headquarters elements, because that's where you're setting up all the IT systems. So I deployed, and that again, when I went to East Timor, I was deployed, and it accidentally happened that I was the only girl on that deployment, and it just, I don't know, it just wasn't meant to happen that way. So I got interviewed by a lot of the psychs, I got interviewed by a lot of the historians, and that got me really interested in the psych process. And even I had a real kind of, the RSM said to me, if anyone can cope with this, Nicky, it's you. Yeah. I was like, yeah, am I even a girl? I can basically just be a boy, right? And it wasn't that way for me. So on that trip, I found myself, I always joke about it, in my room. The good thing about being the only girl was you got a room to yourself.
Bonus.
In my room. Well, I know, right? Massive bonus. I found myself one day, a friend had sent me a Body Shop pack. Remember the Body Shop when it was really popular? Yeah, so the beautiful scrubs and creams and things. And I found myself sitting in front of my laptop watching Legally Blonde with Reese Witherspoon, crying my eyes out, just desiring to have pink nails or pink clothes, or, you know what I mean? And I was like, wow, that was a big turning moment in my life because, yeah, I just fully identified as somebody who didn't need to have women around me. And that was not
until you don't have any.
Yeah. And I should mention as well that the military tried very, very hard to fill that need for me. So there's NGOs that are deployed in East Timor. So they would set me up to go to one of the NGOs' house for dinner, or I'd go and we'd watch Sex and the City and have non-alcoholic wine together. And they really tried to meet that need for me, which was really, you know, the fact that they're even considering that was amazing. So, yeah.
That is really, like, I wouldn't have expected that. I guess what we see of the, you know, this idea around the military is, well, you've chosen this and this is what you've signed up for. So you don't like it. You need to work out how to get over that.
Yeah, and there's definitely an attitude of that. There's definitely that kind of, the saying is, you chose us, we didn't choose you. Which they do a lot. I guess I was really surprised because, number one, I didn't think I needed that sort of female companionship. And number two, they facilitated that without me having to hit any kind of mental health or ask for it or have a breakdown. So, yeah, there really was an element of care in that. I think that maybe there were some people there that might have experienced it before, or, you know, they had some data around it. Like I said, I got interviewed by a lot of people. So, yeah, it certainly wasn't the case on that deployment. They were very caring about the whole situation.
Oh, that's really good to hear. And
yeah,
I'm just wondering, actually, I'm wondering a lot, but I'm wondering with your mum's reaction to you joining full-time military, what was her reaction to your first deployment?
Oh, yeah, same. Like, can you imagine? Like, oh my God, I had a daughter so she could stay with me and we could go shopping together, and she's off to friggin' East Timor, you know what I mean? So again, I had a beautiful sergeant in Darwin who called my mum and had a conversation with her and really put her mind at ease, which was very helpful because, of course, I'm going to say, I'm fine, Mum.
Yeah.
It's great fun being chosen to go on deployment. You know, it feels very exciting and empowering. And so you don't really think about how Mum's going, you know. So to have a sergeant who was a bit older and had children of his own, and he had a conversation with her, and I think they do that for most people, is have some kind of touch point with the parents or the wives or the husbands or whoever are the primary carers, to put their mind at ease a little bit.
Yeah, and so I have a relative who went to Afghanistan. I should probably know what year it is, probably around 2012. And, you know, so his closest contact was contacted by the Army, and they had that similar kind of conversation and gave them the contact details for, I don't know, is it the pastor or, you know, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so they tend to set up a group support when you're away. So there'll be someone that your family can contact if they are concerned or if something happens that you need to know about. So there's systems in place to support you there.
And it seemed to be as well, just, you know, if you're struggling with the idea that your loved one is away, there's, you know, you can reach out, and there are people here that you can talk to try and reduce some of your anxiety.
So I think, again, they do their absolute best to try and make that available to people. And, you know, we have Defence Family Organisation. So, you know, there's all sorts of things in place for people. They do try their best. And I think that eventually it has to come down to the individual to seek that help. Yeah. You know, or to find out what's going to work best for them.
Yeah. So how long were you away for? How long is deployment?
So deployments are generally 6 months. So I was there just under 5 because I went over right at the end of Timor, and we closed down a headquarters element. So it was a shorter deployment for me, which was good. Yeah. But then again, when I was later on in the military, when my partner at the time deployed, he was away for 8 months. So again, they're meant to be 6. That's the standard length of deployment, but depending on movements and, you know, what is required of the group, etc., it can be shorter or longer. Yeah.
And so you only did the one deployment?
Well, then I went on and I did Op Re-Elex, which was when we had all the war kicking off in Iraq and everyone was jumping on boats. Remember when John Howard was in power and we had to put border forces in control? So that's when I deployed with the Navy. I know.
And they didn't kick you off?
Benefit of being... Hey,
they didn't kick you off?
They didn't like us much though. They call us Pongos. So we're the Pongos, the army goes kind of thing. Yeah, that's our nickname. And so I got to deploy. This is another benefit of being a female, is that they need female soldiers to go with the infantry, and they needed female soldiers to go with the cavalry. So I deployed with both of those, and on the Navy ships, and I get terribly seasick. So it was a phenomenal experience. However, it was probably my most, I was on one of the first 2 boats to go out, and it was one of the most real deployments because we actually had to process people, pick them up. We had riots on the boat. It was probably the most action that I would ever see as an IT person and a female. So yeah.
What was it actually like being in deployment? Like, so I guess we have this sort of comes from movies, whatever, but this idea that you're, this service to country and this kind of thing, and it's a real hardship that people are going away for deployment. And there's, from what I've seen, which is mainly from MASH, really, there's lots of digging latrines and things like that.
We love MASH. Who doesn't love MASH? Yeah.
So what is it actually like?
So funny. It is a lot like MASH. As in you form those relationships and those bonds, and you become really comfortable in that environment, So look, I'm going to give you my perspective of this. And like I said, I had quite safe deployments. I wasn't in the line of fire, so I'm not going to speak for everybody in this space, but it very much is just you create a new home in a new environment. I also, because I deployed with headquarters elements, I got to work with all sorts of different countries, so military from different countries, whereas when you deploy as, say, an infantry soldier, you're in a barracks. It's very similar to your barracks at home, so it doesn't feel a whole lot different. You just don't have any of the pleasures that you have at home, So yeah, the first one was it's just a little bit Groundhog Day, but they, like I said, they always do their best. They're always putting on events. We had we had a boozer. You have where you raise money and you can have alcohol once a week or something like that. So they're always trying to do things to keep morale up. But essentially, what it for myself, what it really feels like going on deployment, it feels like you go and the world keeps going and you pop back into the world at a different place and time, and it takes a bit to catch up. The coming home is a lot harder than the going away.
Yeah. How do you, I guess, kind of fit yourself back into that?
So I remember coming back in and being like, there were new people in my friend groups, and my friends had all these experiences about me, and you're kind of very disconnected from your core group, I suppose. And so I remember the first thing I really wanted to do, which is really interesting, was isolate. I was Christmas time when I came home. I was like, I'm not coming home for Christmas. I just want to be by myself and recenter for a little while. And look, again, I'm only speaking from my own personal experience. I'm sure everybody doesn't have it that way. But yeah, it took me a little while to decide how I was going to fit back into my world.
That must have been really difficult, having that conversation with your family, who, you've spoken about your mum was somewhat devastated with your life choices at that point. And, so you kind of, she's imagining this whole reunion scene at the airport, and you've gone, yeah, no, that's not going to happen, because I just need, I need a little while to I just need to sit. I just need to be. And then she had to wait. So that must have been a difficult conversation.
Yeah, I imagine it was. And the thing is, because I had a shorter deployment, when you go on a long deployment, you get 2 weeks off in the middle. Because I had a shorter deployment, I had like 4 days off in the middle. So I just went back to Darwin, and my mum met me on that 4 days. So we had seen each other in that period of time. And then at the end of it, and it's interesting as I look back, because we were a pretty close-knit family. I'd spent every Christmas with them. I've never really missed one, maybe one before this. And then, but they were pretty supportive, I think, from a mental health perspective. They didn't really give me any grief about not coming home. I said, I'll come back in January. I just need this space. And so, look, to be honest, it was completely about me. And it was, I needed to take care of myself, and they supported that as far as I can remember. So they probably did hate it, but they didn't tell me they hated it.
Oh, perfect. That's what parenting's about, isn't it? Yes, of course,
exactly.
I support your decision, darling.
Yeah, and then I get off the phone and go,
my goodness, do you want to know what she's doing now?
Yeah. No, I think, I don't know. I think mothers have this ability too to see when you maybe just need to draw that boundary. Yeah. It's time to take a breath and step back. So, yeah. Yeah,
definitely. And so you were in the army when you met your partner?
Yep, which is really common. You can imagine there's 4 girls and 4,000 boys. So a lot of us
you had
do
your pick.
Pair off. I know, right? You're a bit of a superstar. A lot of us do pair off with army guys. So, yeah, we met. I'd been in 4 or 5 years already. And then like when I came home from East Timor, he was one of the new people in my friend group. And I was like, excuse me,
where did you come from?
This guy? yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how difficult is it to actually be dating someone who is also in the army? Are there additional
challenges?
Not
at all. It's great. Everybody knows. So, for example, I should mention this, before I joined the army, I dated a guy who was he went to RMC. So he went to military college in Canberra. So I was a complete civilian, had no idea what it was all about. And he was in the military. So I remember saying to him, like, they can't tell you can't come home for holidays. And he's like, yes, they can, you know.
Yeah.
So when you're both in the military, it's much easier. When you're like, hey, you know, I know I said I was coming to do this, but now I'm going to do that. It's like, oh yeah, cool. That's, you know, we all deal with it. Last minute changes. We all understand that it sucks, but we do it, you know, so it's a lot easier to be with someone who gets it, gets that there's a different kind of lifestyle attached to it.
Was it difficult? Were you both deployed to separate places at different times? So did that add additional challenges, or, you know, you can't see each other, so you can't fight?
There's an element of that, definitely. So he got his first deployment when I was 8 months pregnant, I think. So he ended up leaving when our first baby was 11 weeks old. And like, so I sort of fell pregnant just as Iraq was kicking off. So they'd asked me to go and I was like, yes, I can go. And then, oh, wait, no, I can't because I'm pregnant. So then he got the opportunity to go. And of course, it was all very exciting because it was early on in the piece. And again, he was in the first wave to go. And so then he got to be the one to go on deployment and I stayed home with the baby. And that was one of the most challenging times in my whole career and in my life, I would say, because I had a very strong work ethic. I was very good at what I did. And then all of a sudden I was working part-time, looking after a baby. I felt like I wasn't being a good mum and I wasn't being a good worker. Yeah. You know, I felt like I just was failing in every area of my life. And then he's, of course, when you go on the first deployment, there's not a lot of infrastructure set up. So it takes a little while to get communications and patterns and, you know, when am I going to speak to him kind of thing. So yeah, we were completely separate for a while there.
So you were still in the army when you fell pregnant with your child?
Yeah, so I waddled around in my cams with my big belly, yes.
How supportive were the army about that?
Yeah, again, they have a lot of systems in place for that. So they're completely, you know, they take care of all the medical appointments, the hospital, everything like that. So it was a wonderful, safe place to have a baby. And then even when I had the baby, I got priority positions in daycare centres and, you know, and then I applied for part-time leave without pay so I could work 2.5 days a week. So there's all sorts of, you know, they've been around this roundabout before. There's all sorts of things in place to support you. I think for me, and even when my partner deployed overseas, I was on maternity leave and they flew me home to my parents for 4 months of that deployment to live with them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for family support, because again, you're going to be on your own with a baby. Like, and I initially said, no, I'll be fine. You met me, I'm excellent at everything. And then like, actually, I'm not superwoman, probably should go home. And again, my mum was the same, like trying not to sort of push me, but it might be a good idea to come home for a while. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went home and had that family support for 4 months. If you can call living with your parents with a baby family support, you know what I mean? I think we were all challenged in that.
In theory, I think it sounds fantastic. In practice, I think I'm not sure I would still be speaking to my family.
I know, right? No, it was absolutely necessary because then when I flew back to Darwin, within a week, my little baby got gastro. I got gastro. I was on the phone crying to my mum, please, can you come? You know what I mean? Yeah. And those kind of things, even though it's a challenge to be back with your family, having that support while your partner's away is really valuable. Yeah, so, and, you know, the military take care of all of that, the removals, your house stays there, waits for you to get back, like, yeah, everything. So.
Oh, that's absolutely amazing. And for you, how was it having your partner being deployed doing something that you couldn't do?
Yeah, that was shit.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. So he'd ring me and I'd be really excited to hear how he went. And this is kind of the point I wanted to make as well when you asked about the deployments. He had a very different experience. So he had some, you know, some action and some, you know, Iraq and some, you know, pretty hairy situations. And I remember speaking to him on the phone saying, wow, like, how was it? And he was like, no, it wasn't good. You know, like being in the reality of that is a very different thing to how exciting it might feel. So here I can say, yeah, deployment was great. It had its own challenges, but I was never in a life-threatening situation like he was.
Yeah.
And so then the reality hits on the other side of the phone, and it's like, okay, he's not enjoying this. This is a tough place to be. Yeah. So yeah, it was very, very interesting experience.
That must have been really difficult. So you had a very new baby at this point, and yes, you had your family support, but it's not the same. And, you know, most women who have got new babies, they need additional support. And yet there you were potentially being in a situation where you had to be the support person for somebody who's on the other side of the world going through something that there's, I imagine, no amount of training can actually prepare you for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I think going into it, I was a bit naive as well, like very excited for him to go, and how hard can it be to have a baby? And I joke now, when I do trainings now, I say, like, you know, training soldiers is a piece of piss compared to training a baby.
100%.
They don't do what they're told in the book,
ever.
You know, so yeah, ever. So yeah, and I had it. He was a very sickly baby. We were in the heat in Darwin. And I remember I had friends, you know, they're supporting me, but essentially my identity completely transformed from, you know, kick-ass army girl partying on the weekends to mother and, you know,
covered in some sort of liquid that's come out of this baby somewhere or another.
Exactly, that's right. And sort of managing that whole process and being obsessed about every freaking kilo that he gained and how exciting it was when he gooed, and my partner was missing out on all that. So there's a real disconnect there. So, you know, when he came home, he hadn't gone through that transformation with me. So essentially he wasn't yet a father, if that makes sense. His identity hadn't moved into that. So I remember when my little one almost took his first step and one of my friends pushed him over, who was like, no, you're not taking your first step without your dad being here, kind of thing. You know, it was just like weeks off him coming home.
So. Just going to carry him around everywhere until dad gets home.
Exactly. Well, it was 11 weeks when he left, and then he got home to a 10-month-old, like a full-on little person. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So yeah. So that was challenging. And then we got married couple of months after that, which was all in the pipework before the deployment happened. But I don't think either of us really understood the enormity of that separation and what it cost us as two people going through that journey together.
Yeah, it's difficult having a baby at the best of times and trying to get your head around that identity change, but so many extra layers of challenges for you with you know,
and he would find it quite challenging when I would send him videos of the baby, or, you know, it's all I wanted to talk about. And he was, I guess, finding it quite challenging because he couldn't be there, so he didn't want the pain of hearing what he was missing out on. Yeah.
And how many, so you got married and then went on to have more children?
Yeah, we've got 3 all up. So I fell pregnant with my second, and that's when I left. So after the first, I had really serious postnatal depression. I think that's really important to say. I didn't acknowledge it. I was very embarrassed about it. I tried to pretend, you know, like I could overfunction my way out of that depression, basically. And then it didn't really... What'd you say?
You cannot overfunction your way out of postnatal depression.
No, it'll come. It'll hit you eventually, yeah? So I completely kind of hid it and ignored it. When I look back now, I just want to hug that version of me, you know? So it didn't really get acknowledged until the second baby, because then I hadn't really taken care of it with the first one. So then the second baby, I went on to medication and had some support and psych support, etc., which was phenomenal. That's why I'm such an advocate now for women, because I'm like, God, if I had just had someone who'd come to me and said, there's nothing wrong with you, like, let's get this out there, let's take the shame away, it may have been a different ride. So yeah, we had the second baby and I went into reserves, and then I was still in the reserves when I fell pregnant with my third. And then when the third came along, I was like, no, I'm done waddling around in my cams with a baby. So yeah.
I'm just wondering, so again, I can only go with kind of what the society's ideas are, but mental health in the army, how well is that spoken about?
So that's a tricky one, because it's very PC, I suppose. It's put out, they try and put a lot of effort into it, but it's on a surface level, in my opinion. And again, this is only my opinion. So this is what led me down the path of studying psychology. When I came back in from overseas. And then when I observed other people coming back in from overseas and the psych process of coming back through, like a soldier coming back from deployment, they just want to get back to their lives. They just want to get home. They don't want to tell you there's anything wrong in case you can't get home, you know. And so seeing people make some really poor choices, and then, you know, my own mental health coming back in, I was like, I think I can change this. So I was like, I'm going to go and be a psychologist and go to Canberra and change policy. Like, yeah, easier said than done, right?
Yes. Just a little bit easier said than done.
Yeah, because there's also, I mean, it's such a double-edged sword, Emma, because there's such a strong, the military is an environment where you're very taken care of. So you can become you can have a learned helplessness because everything is provided for you and done for you. So when you go back into the real world, you can feel a bit lost.
Yeah.
And I observed that a lot. There's also a loss of significance there. You know, however, there are all sorts of support systems, but they don't always work for everybody, you know, so the transitioning out of the military, or even, you know, like the situations, I had some workplace bullying stuff go on in the military, and you go through all the processes, and it's like at some point you have to be self-responsible and decide whether you're going to step up and take this challenge or not, because the system can only support you so much. And I think that's why there's such a loss of mental health for military personnel, where they're so used to being taken care of, and then it gets to the point where it's like you'll be medically discharged and you're out, that's it, no more, you know, and there's no real sort of transitioning there. So it is essentially what led me to do what I do now.
So how was that for you when you, I suppose you had somewhat of a gradual transition out of the army, and that you went into the reserves and then to being a civilian? Were you supported in the reserves?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wasn't actually that gradual, because I'm a very resourceful woman, and when I decide I'm doing something, it happens very quickly, Emma. So I was 15 weeks pregnant and I just didn't tell them. I was like, yeah, I'm ready to get out.
So 15 weeks pregnant with your third baby, and you were still able to hide that? Second baby. You were still able to hide that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think they might have realized at the end, and then they just passed my care over to her. Like, they were like, oh, well, here's all your documents, you know, pass your care over, basically. But I don't know how, I can't quite remember the details, but I managed to skip a few loopholes that you would normally need to take. It normally takes about 6 months to get out, and I just decided and got out very quickly. So at that time, my partner got offered a job back in the mining industry, and with the military, if you can get a job that pays more, you can leave.
Oh, wow.
And so he got out. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's still that way, but that's how it was then. And so he got out very quickly and back into the mining industry. And so I decided to go home to Adelaide where my parents were, so he's still going to be away all the time.
Yeah.
So second baby's coming. Yeah. So like I said, I didn't go through any of the processes of, you know, you have to do seminars and stuff on transitioning out into the workforce. I somehow got out of all that, Emma. I can't tell you how, but I did. And then went back to reserves, and yeah, they're phenomenal. Again, reserves, because they are people who are in the normal workforce and they do this and they're often in it for a long time. But again, it's another sort of camaraderie, another sort of family environment. So,
and you still had that connection with the army that
you still had that kind of toe in the water. So it's a very comfortable environment. I knew what I was doing there. I had a lot of credibility because of the time I'd spent in the full-time army there. So, you know, I sort of got to do both things, both parts of my life. So be the mum and still be the soldier a little bit. So yeah.
So you and your partner both left the army at pretty much the same time? Yeah,
so similar time. So he left before me. Like I said, I did about another 4 years in the reserves, and he was straight out. So yeah.
He was done.
Yeah, well, because mining, you know, he can't do a weekend. He's away every second.
Oh, that is true. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's completely off there. He did look at going back into the reserves for a little while, but again, timelines didn't fit.
So how was it then with trying to find your identity as no longer a soldier?
So that was tough. So again, a lot of what I do now is work with women on identity work, because not only was I no longer a soldier, I was a full-time mother, and you get treated very differently when you're a full-time mother. I remember going into a daycare centre to pick my kids up, and I had my uniform on, and they almost were like, oh, you are important. You know what I mean? Like, oh you do work. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I hate that attitude.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of my coaching experience, I started off working with mums initially, transitioning back into the workforce because of that identity shift. So I think that's the biggest challenge any of us will ever face with everything we go through in our life, is shifting into the person who needs to be that person that creates the life that they have, you know. And when it gets thrust upon you, like motherhood, It's almost like a grieving process for the person you used to be.
100%. I agree with that. You know, you go for, and particularly because when you introduce yourself, often people go, oh, and what do you do?
Yeah.
And,
I'm a mum. Yeah.
And if they say I'm a mum, I want to absolutely cheer and celebrate. When they say I'm just a mum,
yeah,
you know, I think, oh my goodness, okay, we need to sit down and let's have a conversation.
Let's
just
have a
mum.
I know, yeah. I'm that girl as well, Emma,
Yeah.
where I'm like, I think we need to talk. Yeah.
And my husband's always going, maybe you could leave it, Emma. Just one person, maybe you could just leave it. Like,
just let one go.
I just don't think I can, darling.
No, I don't think I can either, because it's generational. Like our mothers make the world go round. Like the mothers take on the like, especially in the history, the generations gone by, the level of responsibility that they take on and the level of feedback that they get, they do not match up. You know what I mean? The amount of women are so resilient, so strong, so resourceful, and they forget this because they've been given this title of just a mother.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what you're doing?
Yeah,
you know, you're raising humans into the next generation, and it's just like I said, you lose a value that just should be really the highest value in our society. So yeah, no, we can't let one go. Sorry, husbands.
Yeah. We're just going to need to add an extra bit of time every time we go out, just in case.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So if you were to talk to young woman who was thinking about joining the army, what would you say to her?
I would first be really curious about what she's looking to achieve from that. So, you know, why do you want to go in? Like, what's the purpose there? And then I would say enjoy every single minute of it. So I used to say, I got to the point where they started to want to progress me into, you know, sergeant stream or even transfer over to officer. I was being asked to go into the officer stream, and I kind of had this feeling at that time, if I go any further in this career, I'm going to become completely institutionalized and I probably won't get my life back, you know. And I just had that intuition at that time, and I stand by that now. I see so many people, the longer you stay in, the more institutionalized you are, the harder it is. So for a young woman, I would say have a plan, go in, enjoy every moment of it, and have an exit plan.
So just what can you expand a little bit on what you mean by the risk of becoming institutionalized?
So being in that environment, and as you get further up the rank chain, there's a lot of significance that comes with that. So for example, I worked up until the sergeant level, and when you go beyond that, you're very, very important. And whenever you say something to someone, you know, like, hey, don't do that, or hey, you're walking wrong, or whatever, you're listened to. There's no recourse. There's no one can argue with you because there's a rank structure. It has to be that way. It's the military. Yeah, that's how we have to do it, so that people will be following instruction if they're in a wartime situation. But when you come back into the real world, that's not how it is. So you are less important. And I don't know if you know anything about life coaching, Emma, but the 6 core needs that we have, one of them is significance. Significance is a really important part of our human experience. And when we lose such a big chunk of significance, so you're so used to being this important person who speaks and is listened to and is not questioned on their command, and then you go into the world and you've got some 15-year-old behind the Macca's counter questioning you, that can be a challenge, right? So there's a big gap there. So like I said, well, you've still got an element of reality. For me, it was like I still kind of feel like I'm me, and if I went back into the real world, I'd know how to function in that place. And I think if you stay in the military too long, being institutionalized makes it harder and harder to relate to people who aren't in that environment. And I think, too, and this might be a bit of a controversial thing and people might give me a bit of hate on it, but I think a lot of the, you know, like Soldier On and things like that, we create environments that look very military because it's a comfortable place for people who've grown up in that space, which I'm all for, but I don't think it actually, you know, retrains them to come back into the world as such.
Yeah, and that's difficult, isn't it? Because
yes,
the real world doesn't look like the military. It doesn't feel like the military.
No. And despite the difficulties of the military, there's a lot of ease in there as well. There's a lot of support. There's a lot of, you know, like, where else do you get paid to play sport every morning and go to the boozer every Friday afternoon? You know what I mean? There is a lot of fun that's to be had in there as well. And so when you come out and you have to work your guts out, you know, 8 to 12 hours a day, and nobody says well done. Yeah. Like, where's my medal? Don't I get a medal for this? Like,
I have done this many years of being alive and being an adult, and no one's giving me a medal.
Exactly. I always say that about about motherhood, nobody goes, well done, you did a great job today. They're all like whinging, they want more. So, you know, I really think there's an element of mental health there that's probably missed. And it doesn't matter how much you give people, they need to choose it.
Yeah.
There's so many support systems, but if they want to continue to be a victim of that, and in the space of like, you know, you tell me what to do and you need to pay me a pension, or you need to give me, I served my country. Yeah, that'll get you so far. But at some point you're going to have to go, who am I? If I could swear, I'd say, who the F am I and what the F am I here for? Right? Because you've got to take back your life. Like the military is an institution. It's not who you are.
And for most people, it's an institution that you're part of for a portion of your life.
Yeah, for a chunk of time. And I think it's very easy to get stuck in those good old days mentality. It's like that was the best time of my life. And it is a fabulous time. But your life goes on, and you don't, like, I feel really sad when I hear people say that, because I'm like, oh my God, isn't now, like right now, today, the best time of your life? Like, how do we change that?
Yeah.
Of course, why I'm the crazy person who does coaching for people.
Yeah, that's often how I feel when people say that high school were their best years of their lives. And unlike you, I think high school, you think that the military was awesome. So yes, but high school, I was like, man, if that was the best years of your life, you've had a sucky life.
I agree. High school was brutal. I never want anyone to go back to high school. Oh my God. Yeah. And you're right. And it's like, you know, sort of giving away your power. How do we make your life great in every space?
So with that in mind, if, you know, a friend of yours, if their child was to tell them that they wanted to join the military and they were then, you know, what would you say to her?
To the parent?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'd say let them go. I think it's a wonderful idea for character development and responsibility and leadership and all of that stuff. And so as the parent, even if my own children wanted to go, though the parent in me would be heartbroken, the person, you know, like the individual in me would be like, yeah, you are going to get some of the best lessons of your life in this environment. So, you know, support it as best you can and be the person. My family were always the soft landing space that I could come back to. And I would say provide that for them, because they're going to go there and they're going to be challenged and they're going to go through identity crisis and they're going to have some really tough experiences, both socially, you know, and logistically. And so being the person who can develop them into being resilient enough to cope with that, I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah, beautiful. And do you talk to your kids about your time in the military?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When we go back to that identity stuff, my children at one point, I think I only had the two at the time, they were 2 and 4, and the little one said, Daddy goes to work and Mummy does the dishes. And I was like, what have I done? I haven't told them how fucking phenomenal I am. Like, what the hell? You know, so then I started to, they you know, and again, were you mum? Were you both in the army? And their friends will ask them too, was your mum in the army? You know, so we talk about it all the time. And, you know, even at times that I'm like, you would never be able to go in the army with your room looking like that.
Fine, I don't want to go in the army anyway.
I was the messiest soldier. Like, I was not tidy at all, and I made it, so it's okay.
But the kids don't need to know that, right?
Hey,
the kids don't need to know that part, do they?
Exactly. No, that's right. Mummy was perfect. Yeah. No, but especially with their dad being in Iraq and stuff, you know, there's lots of stories and we've got lots of video footage and stuff. So they're always super keen to hear about it. Yeah, we're completely open with it.
So this episode's going out around ANZAC Day, and I didn't ask you this beforehand, so hopefully it's okay to ask. But what does ANZAC Day mean to you?
So that's a beautiful, beautiful question, Emma, because it's really transitioned over the years too. So it was something that, you know, was very, very important to me. And then as I moved out of the military and into motherhood and had my own mental health challenges, I found it to be almost a bit of a pressured thing. So when the kids were little and my husband was away and I didn't want to drag them out to a dawn service, it was like you were shamed for it. And so I was like, you know, having to sort of work through that for people. And look, lots of people didn't have a great experience of their military career. Lots of people deployed and had horrible, you know, PTSD and had situations that they don't want to go and stand in that environment and remember. And they've transitioned on to the next version of them. So I think ANZAC Day is an individual choice. As I get older, it becomes something again that's very important to me. Like the last few years with COVID, I have found it something that I've really wanted to observe. And, I take the kids out the front with the candle in the driveway, or, if we can go out, we go out to the dawn service, because I've really wanted to acknowledge that part of my life. But I think it should be such a personal choice for you, how you decide to honour that day, whether you need to be by yourself or whether you want to be with old friends or not. You know what I mean? Like, I think you have to make that choice for yourself, and there's no shame around it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I 100% agree. I think that everybody needs to do what's right for them right now. And what's right for you right now may not be the same as what was right for you last year. It may not be the same as what's right for you next year or in 5, 10, 20 years' time. And
yeah, exactly. I used to find it quite triggering because I would feel very alone. So being in a city where like nobody else had been in the military, and then my husband would be working, and I'd take the kids to the march, and I'd feel so emotional because it would just highlight the fact that I was alone, and motherhood is isolating anyway. And then that's another layer on top of it. So, I think you get to choose however that shows up for you. And I know that it's very, very important. Like I said, as we age, those things seem to be more important. You see lots of the old diggers who are really there, acknowledging that part of their life. But when you're in the midst of fucking kids and shitty nappies, or whatever it might be for you, if you're in the midst of a mental health challenge, you make a choice that suits you.
And that can be quite difficult with parenthood. When you are in a space where you are emotional and you're by yourself with your children, that's very difficult. And I'm starting to finally get to the point where I think actually it's important that my children see that I have emotions and I'm not a robot. But also, you don't necessarily want to have a breakdown in the middle of the city with your 3 kids there with how many thousands of people marching around you, so. Yeah,
exactly. That's 100% right, Emma. So I agree with you. And again, it's age appropriate for the children as well, isn't it? Like little children, where they don't want to see you in distress, it's going to be much more difficult for them to assimilate that knowledge. And so there is an element of pushing that feeling away to cope with it. And again, we just do what we can, And
so with that in mind, have you connected with organisations that do bring ex-service people together, places like RSLs or, you mentioned Soldier On. Have you connected with any of those?
Oh, a little bit. When I first got here to Perth and started doing coaching, I connected with a few organisations. But like I said, I think I have a very different take on it, and it feels very much, again, if you want to hate me for this, come at me. It's okay.
I will. I've got the boxing gloves ready.
Well, the people that are listening, I'm sure there'll be some that disagree, and that's completely fine. But again, the way I observe it, it can keep people stuck in a victim mentality. And I really am an advocate for breaking that victim mentality and taking charge of your own life. So that's just my purpose, and that's just the way that I support people through coaching. So personally for myself, no, I didn't feel the need to. I find my own tribe wherever I am. That's very, part of of my own identity. I find that tribe in sporting arenas, in gyms, in different clubs, you know what I mean? So I felt the need for it. I don't find it something that contributes to my life in any way. I love the experience. It's almost like I loved it and it's done now. We move on. But not everybody's that way. And so I'm completely supportive. These organizations are phenomenal. And if they get people out and connecting, I'm 100% for that, but it's just not for me.
Yeah. And that's it. I think that there are some people that are going to resonate really well with those organisations and other people that are going, you know what, I don't need that. So I'm fine too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think if you're in the depths of depression, like I lost mates to suicide, and I was like, God, well, how did he end up being someone who took his own life? He was such a solid, positive guy, and it just, when it takes you down a path. And so if it's getting someone out of an environment like that, like, oh my God, please keep doing that work. Please keep connecting people, because I think isolation is the thing that causes most of our mental health problems, is we start to pull away. So if we can combat that through these organisations, then I'm 100% there. Yeah, but it's not something that I've ever felt the need to follow up on.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it can go both ways, and I think we see it with support groups often. Is that when you're going specifically for the purpose of going to a support group, all you're doing is reliving that experience that you need the support group for. So there's no movement forward, because you're constantly being pulled back.
And as a coach, like, and as someone who's come through like a psych and then coaching, I know that if you tell that story over and over and over again, it becomes more and more solid in your brain and more true, and it becomes more and more difficult for you to shift identity. So again, different modalities. People sometimes say that doing it over and over again can desensitize as well. But for me, it's just when you get so stuck on the story that, you know, you went through this thing, and that's all you can think about, and that's all you go and talk about, and that's all your friends talk about, you really are keeping yourself stuck in that one place in your life.
Yeah, look, I think it can desensitize. I think it can also re-traumatize.
Yeah.
At the same time, places like RSLs, I think that they can be awesome because you know that the people who are sitting in the RSL have got similar experiences. So it's not necessarily rehashing some of the trauma. It might be sharing some of the good stories and knowing that you've got space for that. And that's really powerful.
And they get it. You don't have to explain to someone who's been in the military what you mean by the terminology you're using, or, you know, or if you're a little bit, because we can be a little bit rough around the edges in the military, and we can make light of things that are pretty serious, you know, because I think we have to.
Yeah, black humour is kind of the thing that gets you through, I think.
Exactly, yeah. So being in an RSL situation means you can let those barriers down. You don't have to worry about saying the wrong thing and offending anybody because we've been through it. So 100%,
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of this today. Before we wrap up today, have you got anything else that you would like to share or any thoughts that you'd like to add?
I guess I just wanted to bring, like I said, lots of people have gotten negative experiences, and I wanted to bring a positive spin to the military experience that I had, and especially as a female. And people often ask me, you know, was there discrimination? And look, there was, and I'm sure it was probably more than I saw. The number one thing that I want women to know is that if you think it's a problem, if you think being a woman is a problem, if you feel like a victim as a woman, that's what will show up in your external world. So for me, it was like, what do you mean I can't do that because I'm a girl? And that kind of attitude, I when I look back, I think that's the thing that got me through and got me the success and got me the awards. It just never was a barrier for me. So, you know, again, if we can flip out of that, we need people fighting for the rights in that space. But if you personally are having trouble with it, you can flip out of it, seeing it as a problem and just see it as not even an issue and behave that way, then the world will respond differently to you as well. So that's a really big part of my message.
It sounds, though, like you experienced some positive discrimination. You know, so...
How so?
So when you were over in Timor and they organised spaces where you could have that contact with other women. So, you know, while I understand that I'm sure that in the military there's a lot of negative discrimination, it sounds like they're making great strides towards equity. And
100%. And that when I came here to Perth and got into the sort of women that are in mining, I was blown away by how far behind they are, you know, from that military sense. So absolutely positive discrimination. But that can also go against you in that the guys are then like, oh,
she's got her own room, so apparently we're supposed to treat her the same, but we can't share a bunk with it, you know, that kind of thing.
Exactly, and it's you know what, I believe in equity, not equality. We are different, men and women, and we require different support systems, but so does every human, you know. So I should also note as well, on that deployment, they also thought that I was sleeping with one of the other married corporals. So that happens when you're a woman as well. You can't go anywhere without being hooked up with someone. So there's a lot of support, there's a lot of gossip at the same time. But like I'm saying, for me, I was like, I don't give an F what you're saying about me. I'm going to be the best I can be. And I like show up and prove them wrong. Don't verbalize, don't whinge, don't chuck a tanty about it. Be like, no, it's not true. And I'm just going to keep doing my job as an absolute gun, because then the respect comes regardless of the rumors.
Yeah. How difficult was that for you with those rumors?
That was that one in particular. So I'd experienced it quite a bit. And especially when we all went out in the ships together, there was, oh God, I've been in front of many a committee there where I was like, can I speak freely now, sir? And letting them understand what the fuck was going on. But that one in particular was really tough because I was the only girl. I was like, who did you expect me to be friends with? Yeah. And I was also one of two corporals. So we were the lowest ranking officers, like ORs in the headquarters. And so we would go on runs together and walk together. I knew his wife, like we had an excellent friendship. And then it was like, oh yeah, I think they're hooking up, you know, of course, because men and women can't be friends, you know, so that one was particularly painful because I was very good friends with a lot of the people that said it as well. But it's just not unexpected. And again, I always made the choice, Emma, to never let it be the thing that would knock me off my path. I was like, oh.
Did it impact how you behaved? So did you still keep going for the runs with him, or did it meet? So you didn't kind of go, oh God, well now I need to be guarded with who I'm friends with because of these rumours? Good for you.
It's their problem, not mine.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've been in front of our officers before where I was being reprimanded for something. I think I got reprimanded for hugging one of my girlfriends on a deployment because it's too much. The boys can't handle it.
Oh,
and I was like, you know what? It's not my problem. It's your problem.
Also, we weren't in bikinis jelly wrestling, okay?
Like, yeah, we're in our heads. Exactly. That's right. Exactly. And they're just so almost over the top about it sometimes. So I was just always of the opinion, like, as long as I'm in integrity, and don't get me wrong, like my husband was in the military. I hooked up with people, let's be honest. But if it, I would be open about that. And if it wasn't the case, it was like, this is your problem, not mine. This is a cultural, systemic problem, not my problem. So I can keep showing up and being friends with that person because how dare I shrink myself to suit your systemic problem?
Oh, I'd applaud. That's awesome.
Let's clap.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. And I think it's useful to kind of have that perspective that you don't have to change yourself because of somebody else's beliefs.
Yeah.
And how you show up is how people see you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You're going to go through periods in your life where people are saying shit about you, and you can spend a lot of time and energy rebutting them or trying to correct them or trying to get in the way, or you can keep being you. And when you keep being you, eventually people notice.
Yeah.
It might take a week, it might take a month, it might take a year, but people go, you know what? I don't know if you're right about her. She's showing up like a pretty good person. So, keep being you. And like I said, it's a big, big part of the leadership work that I do now with women in corporate spaces, because it's like, don't waste your time and energy fighting these little tiny Spitfire battles. Stay on your path, which is to lead the way, model the way for other women, be awesome. Yeah.
Again, so much easier said than done. But
yeah, that's why everyone needs a coach in that space. Like when you're being, and it is so much easier said than done, Emma, and being on the other side of that, I think is what makes me good at taking women through it, because I'm doing it from a personal experience. So, having had that done to me and been through, I nearly got kicked out of my unit because I was dating a guy who ended up causing a whole bunch of ruckus in the unit. And I was a very junior soldier at the time. So having been through those kind of situations means that, I'm able to, with my education and my experience, really support women through that, because it is really hard. You just want to defend yourself. And defending yourself sometimes makes you look worse than just showing up and being the awesome version of you that you are.
And it's a hard choice, isn't it? If I defend myself, then, he who doth protest too much type thing. But if I don't defend myself, well, then am I admitting guilt? So
yes. Yeah. And that's what I mean, like using the systems that are there for you. So I talk a lot about conflicting conversations. Go in, have the voice, have the conflicting conversation. Move on. Don't keep telling the story, Don't keep saying, oh my God, and this happened to me, and this happened to me, and this happened to me. Deal with it, move on.
Yeah. Oh, well, on that note, I think thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being so open and sharing so much, and I appreciate all your insights into what it's been like as a soldier, what it's been like being married to a soldier, and what it's been like redefining yourself outside of that role now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Emma. This is such a space that I'm so passionate about to speak to, because like I said, I think a lot of it's a bit secret and a lot of it's a bit negative as well. So it's good to have the opportunity to bring a different voice to it. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate you sharing the positive experiences. I think all we hear is about, sexual harassment and bullying in the armed forces. We don't hear that deployment is really fun. We don't hear that the army went above and beyond to make sure that you had women to watch Sex in the City with. So. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was, amazing, just experiences like that. So, and like I said, plenty of negative experiences, but if you get caught up in those, that is going to be your life. So let's, And
I think we have negative experiences in our life anyway, right?
Correct. Yes, it's part of our resilience training.
Yeah, 100%. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome, Emma.
Thank you for joining me for today's episode of A Hidden World of Women, a podcast brought to you by Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. For more information on the services we offer, head to whws.org.au or Women's Health and Wellbeing Services on YouTube and social media. Looking forward to the next episode where we uncover the hidden world of women.